Hi, welcome to An Abundance of Books. Today we're doing my September wrap-up. I have 8.5 things to talk to you about. Just one of them I finished in October, but I wanted to talk to you about it now while it's still fresh in my brain. And this was a really good month for me. The lowest that I had was a 3-star. I don't know if I've even done that yet this year, but I'm very excited to talk to you about all these things. Let's go in the order in which I think people will care about these books. The first one is The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. This is a brand new release and I really enjoyed it. I end up giving this 4 stars. There's just a little something to be desired. I think I would have changed the direction that this took. But anyway, this is about our main character, Shay, who learns of the death of one of her friends through a podcast and then goes back to her hometown to investigate it. And the host of that podcast is also a childhood friend of hers, so they sort of team up to figure out what's going on. And I feel like that's all you should know. I knew some stuff going into this that I think would have been a nice reveal, but you should know that I'm calling this Karen Slaughter light. It's very tough to get through, lots of content warnings. The opener has a whole list of them, so it's pretty much everything. But it's a really interesting story and I really like the writing in it. I think that my problem is this has a bunch of flashback stuff. It's not a before and after, but it probably should have been. And I vastly prefer the before, and I feel like that could have been the book and that would have been more interesting to me. It's also a podcast. Well, you know that, I said that already. But it's not incorporated super naturally. Like, it'll be a lot of just sort of Shay monologuing, and it's supposed to be a podcast. I didn't do the audiobook. I don't know if that would sort of enhance the experience. Just when I think of a book having a podcast element, it's more than just the story, but broken up with interjections. But I thought that this was so fun. I flew through it. Fun is the wrong word. Like, it's the kind of book that you can feel bad for loving, but I did love it. Except for that second half, and I think the problem with this is Shay is in a lot of dangerous situations, but is never actually in danger, you know? Like, the main character is always going to get unscathed, and I wanted some tension there, or for something bad to happen, and it was just a little too safe, especially given what happens in the first half. Sorry for being vague, but I do recommend it. Another cult book that I read is Cult Classic by Sloane Crosley. This is one that just came up at my library. It had cult in the title. I love cult books. So I grabbed it and I couldn't have imagined what this would be, but I ended up really enjoying it. It's a very stream of consciousness kind of story. It's about our main character Lola, who is having a work dinner with some friends, and then she goes outside and runs into an ex-boyfriend. And then the next day she runs into another ex-boyfriend, and then the next day another one, and there might be some culty stuff happening. It's all very vague, but there is a proper cult in it that you do get to learn about and figure out where their secret hideaway is and stuff. Like, it's very good for all of those culty aspects, but I think that Lola is a very difficult character to get behind. She's purposefully unlikable, and it's just stream of consciousness, like her musings on life and love and career, and I ended up finding it all super fascinating. I audiobooked it, and so I'd just sit there and it was like having a friend complain to me, and I ended up really enjoying it. I think because it is so voicey, this is something you're either gonna gel with or you're really not, and I'm just very happy that I gelled. Unfortunately, the synopsis sort of promises some thrillery aspects, and that's not really there. Like, the ending, there's no action, it just sort of peters out, but I had a really good time and I'd be interested in reading some more from Sloane Crosley, and I gave that one 4 stars. I also read Vicious by V Schwab, something I have been wanting to read forever, knew that I would love, and I did love it. I feel sort of weird about it because I gave it 5 stars, but I don't have this desperate love for it that I feel like I should have, and based on reading it and all of the elements, it should be like in my top 10, but it's not, and I don't know if I have to reread it. This is about Victor and Eli, who were friends at school, but then 10 years later they've had some sort of falling out and are trying to destroy each other. This is another one where I feel like you will have heard more about the synopsis than I want to get away because it's interesting to figure out. But it's immediately told in before and after timelines when they're in school, and then 10 years later it opens with Victor grave robbing, and he's accompanied by a 12-year-old girl. Immediately hooked. Like this, the opening of this is so good, and I think technically it's just so good. I want to love it. One of the first things that really got me was Victor's parents are self-help gurus, and they've written a bunch of self-help books, and his senior art thesis is he blacks out the books to make them say something else, like give up, your dreams are pointless, when it's like don't give up on your dreams, you know what I mean? I just think he's such an interesting character. They're all such interesting characters, and there's so many ideas in this book, and they deal a lot with mortality and morality, which are just themes that I love. I think I maybe just wanted more from the ending, because like technically this book is perfect. It does something at the halfway point, some stuff changes. I love it. Okay, here I think is where my big issue lies. The end is a countdown where it's like 12 hours till midnight, 5 hours till midnight. And I feel like that should propel you forward, but it just felt bloated to me. I still gave it 5 stars. Like, I do love this book. I feel very fondly about it. There's a little oomph missing for me, but I highly recommend it if you haven't read this book that came out in 2013. I also read Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, which I ended up enjoying. I was surprised, but it ended up really working for me. Sorry, this framing is booking me, that's better. Anyway, this is about, I can't tell you what it's about. It's about Piranesi, who lives in the house, and the house has many corridors and rooms, and he sort of travels them. It's something you really can't know stuff going into, but I will say the writing starts off being very intimidating, but after a chapter or two, it's actually super easy to read. It's very simple language with a complex world, I think. I was really vibing with it up until the ending. It was a 4-star before that, but the ending didn't do what I wanted it to do. It went in a direction that wasn't the direction I was hoping. It's a fair direction to go in. It made the book less than it could have been, I think. Sorry to be so vague about that one. I'm giving it 3 stars. I was close to giving it a 4. I do recommend it, especially if you want to get into a literary fiction, or this is a prize winner. This won the Women's Prize. Like, it feels very accomplished to read something like that. It's definitely not an intimidating book. Then I read Something Wilder by Christina Lauren. This is their new release. It is pitched as an adventure romance, and I get it in concept, but I think by doing that, you have a weaker adventure and a weaker romance. The adventure part was a very cool idea. It's about our main character who lives on a ranch, and her father is obsessed with treasure hunting, and it's following clues and maps and stuff like that. I think there's a good idea in there. They just aren't experienced in that kind of storytelling, and the romance wasn't the focus, so anytime it became the focus, it was really jarring. It was also a old romance, like they had broken up and were coming back together, which means you were missing a lot of the pieces about what their relationship was like before and how they met, and like foundational things that you want in a romance, which was unfortunate. I think it was really fun. There were some twists that I didn't see coming. It just needed another pass through. If we had just done this in a year or two, I think it could have been really good. But I had a fun time, and I gave it 3 stars. We can talk about these now. I read The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wang. This is so cute. It's a graphic novel about a seamstress or dressmaker who is hired by the prince to make him dresses. The art is really fun. The style that I like in a graphic novel, a lot more cartoony, so that I can just sort of get through it. It's cute and sweet and has just enough plot to keep it interesting, but also a graphic novel that you can just fly through. I give it 4 stars, not because there's anything wrong with it, just because you're a little limited in the story. You could tell I wanted a little bit more. Then I read Love Beyond Body, Space and Time, an Indigenous LGBT Sci-Fi Anthology. Thank goodness I read this. I don't have to say that title ever again if I don't want to. This is a collection of 11 stories, I think. 12. Oh wait, no, some of those are intros. And it was fine. There were some stories in here that I really enjoyed. I think the ones that leaned into the sci-fi were much better for me than the ones that were more vaguely sci-fi. Like, you had to search for the sci-fi in it. Some of them were about, like, you thought it was Earth, but it was actually a different planet, but functionally it was sort of the same. And a lot of, like, metaphorical ones. I'm thinking of the one with the hummingbird. The Boys Who Became Hummingbirds. Yeah, that one was just very, it felt more like fantasy than sci-fi. But there were two that I really enjoyed. Nele, I don't know if that's how you say it, but that's by Darcy Little Badger, and it is about a vet on a spacecraft to Mars, and it's wonderful. It's got dogs, how could you not love it? And the other one I really liked was Transitions. Perfectly You, that's the one, thank goodness. This book is so small, how could I not find it? That one was very Black Mirror sort of, but like if Black Mirror was wholesome. I thought it was an interesting collection, and I think I figured out why I don't like short stories as much. It's because the only thing you really get out of them is writing. Like, if I think of the Four Doorways, it's writing, setting, characters, plot, and in 15 pages you really only get writing. Like, a lot of these, the characters aren't named, or they take place over a day or something, so I need them to have a little bit more substance to them. This one though also did feature a poem, which I think would be nice if more short story collections included. I'm giving it 3 stars because there were a lot in here that just sort of went over my head, but I wouldn't hesitate to recommend it. Then I read 3 Kisses One Midnight by Roshni, Chokshi, Evelyn, Skye, and Germanen. I made a whole video raving about this. I think this is just the most precious YA romance ever. This book is stunning. It's about our 3 best friends, Oni, True, and Ash, as they all prepare for the Halloween Midnight Masquerade, which is the founding ceremony, and the Lady of Moonridge is supposed to come and haunt you. And it's just precious and adorable. It's a bunch of romances, but also magic and Halloween. Oni has a crush on the boy she calls Alexander the Great looking. Like, it's just so cute and fun, and I had such a good time. I feel like I struggled to talk about this book, which I think means it's really good. I think maybe also because this is essentially a short story collection. It's 3 interconnected stories that each one is so short you can't really give much away. It's pretty simple. It's a YA romance. It goes how you think it would go, but the fun ghosty stuff is in here too. There's a haunted house, there's a cat, and it's got Meg Greenjoy and Mr. Brightside, who are just the most adorable couple ever, and I love them so much. If we're talking about doorways, this one has everything. Plot, amazing. Characters, amazing. Setting, ooh, I love the setting here. I love a rich, posh party. It's something that's really working for me. They have a greenhouse at night with like fairy lights in it. Perfect. What's the other doorway? Writing, of course. Yeah, the writing in here is beautiful. Roshni Chakshi is the only one I've read from before, but I know that she has beautiful writing, so biasedly I assume that is her, but they don't delineate who is which story. It seems to be fully collaborative, and I loved it. 5 stars. And then the last book, this is the half one, because I technically started this not in September and finished it not in September, but it is done now, and I'm talking to you about it. This is Caliban's War by James S.A. Corey, the second books in the Expanse series. And I really like this. I think that these are just excellent sci-fi books. If you're not someone who reads hard sci-fi, I think these are actually a really good entry point, because they fly by. Like, this is 600 pages, but we've got 4 perspectives and at least 2 plot lines going on at all times. The chapters are really well paced. It's got a good mix between action and political stuff and sciencey stuff. There's a character in here called Prax, who is a space botanist, and my husband's read this and we were talking about it, and he said he didn't really care about Prax, and I was like, no, tell me more about plants in space. They also do a little bit about like how childbirth works in space, which like I didn't even think of, but yeah, it's wild. I think it's just got some very smart sci-fi concepts in here. This being the second book, I can't tell you much, but in the first one, Leviathan Wakes, we follow James Holden and his crew as they're, what are they doing? I don't know, so much happens in this book. It's just sort of an epic space opera fighting a new material that might be an existential threat to all life. This one also introduces some new characters. Prax, as I mentioned, but apparently we never see him again. But it's also got Avrasala. I've read it so many times and I can still never say it right. Avrasala, I think is her name. She is part of the UN on Earth. And then Bobby, who is a Martian Marine, basically, and she's wonderful. Both of those characters are just so much fun. I also did the audiobook with this one, and I think that the narrator does an incredible job of bringing these people to life and also just like motivating you to get through a 600-page book. It's interesting, I don't see a lot of booktube people talking about this. This is pretty old now, I think it's like 2012, but I think it's still a really well done book. And I look forward to reading the third one. I think that there are 8 in this series. I'm only committing to the first 3. I wouldn't be sad to keep going past that, but like, I got a lot of books on my TBR I gotta get through. So there you go. These are the 8+1 books that I read in September. All wins, no losses, and I'm very pleased with myself. So thank you so much for joining me. Have a lovely October, and I'll see you in another video. Bye.